welcome to Sleepy Tales, a place where myths and legends are told slowly and softly to help you gently fall asleep. Before we begin, I'd love for you to share where you're from and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. And if you enjoy relaxing stories, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a night of our peaceful tales. Now settle in, relax, and drift off to tonight's bedtime story. In the mythic tale of Cupid and Psyche, love is tested through trials, betrayal, and transformation. Psyche, a mortal woman of extraordinary beauty, captures the heart of Cupid, the god of love, but their union is forbidden and fraught with challenges. Deceived by curiosity, Psyche faces a series of impossible tasks set by Venus, Cupid's vengeful mother. Yet through each trial, Psyche proves her worth, demonstrating a strength born of love's deepest pain. Ultimately, her perseverance, devotion, and the help of the gods lead to her apotheosis, becoming a goddess and forever uniting with Cupid, the god who once loved her in secret. Their eternal bond, tested by time and fate, culminates in the birth of their daughter, Voluptus, the embodiment of pleasure and the peaceful union of love and soul. In a kingdom nestled between the whispering winds of mountain ridges and the murmuring fields of grain, there lived a mortal girl named Psyche, the youngest of 3 daughters, born to a noble king and queen. Her sisters were fair and admired in their own right, each married to princes whose names were carved in the ledgers of men. But Psyche's beauty defied such measurements. It did not inspire desire, it evoked reverence. Strangers traveled across kingdoms to glimpse her face. Artists threw down their brushes in despair, claiming the gods had already painted perfection. And poets, even when warned against hubris, compared her not to lilies or stars, but to Venus herself. Temples once raised in honor of the goddess of love grew quiet. Altars that once smoked with incense grew cold. Statues crumbled beneath ivy, while flocks of pilgrims turned their faces away from the divine and toward the mortal. Psyche, for all her gentleness, bore the burden of being too beautiful for her own time. Venus, goddess of beauty, heard the silence. She watched her temples fall into disuse, and her name whispered only in stories, fading at the edge of flame. And when she heard mortals speak of Psyche with the same reverence they once saved for her, jealousy, ancient and sharp, welled up like seawater in her heart. She would not allow her dominion to be challenged. She would make the girl suffer, not through scars or ruin that would be too simple, but through love. A cursed, poisonous love. Venus called for her son. Cupid, known to mortals as the god of love, though his power extended far beyond what they understood, was not a child, nor a cherub as later paintings would claim. He moved through shadows and longing, shaped the destinies of kings and beggars with the tip of his golden arrow. He wielded 2 kinds of darts, those that sparked love and those that extinguished it into loathing. He knew the weight of every heart he struck. He also knew his mother's moods. She beckoned him with honeyed wrath and ordered him to find this mortal Psyche, to pierce her with one of his arrows while she slept, and to make her fall in love with the most grotesque creature in existence, not merely unloved but reviled, a beast unfit for even the sympathy of wild dogs. Cupid agreed, on the surface. But when he descended that night into the mortal girl's chamber, veiled in mist and silence, something shifted. Psyche was asleep beneath woven sheets, her face half turned to the window, her breath steady as snowfall. Moonlight slid across her skin like water over polished stone. She was not only beautiful, she was still, quiet, even in dreaming. And when Cupid raised his arrow, intending to scratch her skin and twist her fate, his hand faltered. For the first time, the god of love felt his own heart tremble. A tremor as light as a moth's wings, but undeniable. In the moment his hand slipped and the arrow grazed his own flesh, he realized the impossibility of the task. He had fallen into the snare of his own power. Cupid vanished before she woke, unseen and silent, but not unchanged. From that day, he watched her. He was present when her sisters married, and she remained alone. No suitor dared approach her. They honored her, admired her, worshipped her even, but none spoke the words of love. For how could one love what they believed to be divine? Psyche, untouched by human affection, lived in a paradox of reverence and isolation. Her beauty, too vast to be reached, became her prison. Her father, perplexed and desperate, journeyed to the oracle of Apollo. He knelt in ash and supplication and asked why the most beautiful daughter of his house remained unwed. The answer was merciless. Let the maiden be adorned in funeral garb and led to the highest peak. There she shall be claimed by a winged serpent, feared by gods and men alike. He waits not in temples, but in shadowed valleys. Her fate is sealed, not as a bride of mortal kind, but as a sacrifice to destiny. Psyche heard the words and did not cry out. Her parents wept, the city mourned. But Psyche, silent, walked with them up the mountainside, dressed not in silk or gold, but in the muted wrappings of death. She moved like a flame kept just barely alive by wind. The sun dipped low and the wind howled not in violence, but in mourning. When they reached the summit, no beast waited. The mourners, trembling, left her there. Psyche stood alone on the peak, arms crossed against the cold, wondering if love would ever find her, or if it had always been an illusion gifted to others. But she was not meant to die. As twilight deepened, a breeze stirred, not sharp, but steady and warm. Zephyrus, the west wind, unseen and eternal, lifted her body into the air as though she weighed less than a dandelion's breath. Her eyes closed as sleep claimed her, not from fear but from peace, and when she awoke, the mountain was gone. In its place stretched a valley carved by no hand, hidden by no map. A palace rose before her, white marble laced with gold, towers shaped like dreams remembered upon waking. Music drifted through the halls, notes without musicians, soft as twilight. Voices spoke to her, kind and welcoming, though no faces accompanied them. "You are welcome here, lady. All is yours." Psyche, dazed but not afraid, crossed the threshold. The palace responded to her movement like it had waited for her. Baths poured themselves, food appeared steaming on tables, and silks unfolded without seamstress or servant. And when night fell, so did he. He did not let her see his face, only his voice spoke, warm and low, as her room darkened and the world became still. He lay beside her in silence first, then in words, then in love, a love gentle but firm, without name, without origin, a love unseen. He warned her, "You must not seek to look upon me. Trust is the only rule here." And Psyche, who had never known the arms of another, let herself believe in something she could not see, even as a part of her wondered if love, like beauty, was another fleeting gift from the gods. Yet within her, the ember stirred, and far above them, in the bright halls of Olympus, Cupid remained hidden, but not from himself. He had broken his mother's order, and for that the gods never forgave lightly. The days passed in a rhythm Psyche could not name, for there was no sun to rise or fall, only a soft golden glow that changed subtly like breath. The palace she now called home was timeless, and in its endless corridors and sunless gardens, she walked as one dreaming. Servants, though none could be seen, attended to her every need. Their voices were kind and careful, as if they feared startling her. They called her lady and spoke of a husband she had not seen. They spoke of his love as if it were a fact as ordinary as the turning of seasons. But Psyche, though comforted, remained uncertain. Love to her had always been a story meant for others. Only at night did he come. The room would darken completely. The lamps would snuff themselves out. The air would still, and then she would feel his presence, warmth before touch, breath before voice. He spoke little, and when he did, it was in tones of care and restraint. He never told her his name. He asked only that she trust him, that she not seek to know more than what he gave, that she not bring light where he had given darkness. In time, Psyche ceased to fear him. She came to expect his arrival, then to yearn for it. His arms, when wrapped around her in the night, spoke more clearly than words. He was not a monster, not a beast sent to destroy her. He was gentle and attentive. When she cried softly from loneliness, he kissed her tears away. When she laughed in the dark, he held her closer, as if guarding the sound from the world outside. But the more she loved, the more a quiet ache grew within her. There were questions she could not voice, longings she dared not name. It was not enough to be adored by a shadow. She began to wonder whether trust without truth was truly love at all. Her world, beautiful and strange, remained hidden from everyone she had ever known. And though the palace gave her all she asked, it could not give her family. She thought often of her sisters, of their hands in hers, of the childhood they shared before her name became legend and her life unraveled into prophecy. She did not even know if they mourned her or if they believed her dead. She gathered courage and asked the night for a gift. "Let me see them," she whispered to the darkness. "Let me see my sisters once more, just once." There was silence, the kind of silence that stretches between hearts and fates. But the next morning, the voice of her husband came softly to her. "If you must, then so be it, but beware. The world you left does not understand this one. They may love you, but they will not understand what you have, not as you do." Still, he granted her wish. The west wind returned as gently as it had come before and carried her across fields and mountains. She was left in the hills near her father's house, hidden from view, but close enough for her sisters to find her. Word spread quickly. Psyche, alive and radiant, had returned from death itself. Her sisters wept with joy when they saw her, but their joy did not survive the first glance at her robes, the softness of her skin, the way the light seemed to follow her. When Psyche spoke of the palace in the valley and her mysterious husband, envy curled around their hearts like ivy. They had married well, but not like this. They had luxury, but not magic. And Psyche had been lifted from sacrifice into something divine. They pressed her for details, asked pointed questions masked as concern. You say he loves you, but you've never seen his face. No, Psyche said softly. He comes only in darkness. And what if he's a monster? One of them asked. What if that's why he hides? What if he's keeping you there as a prisoner, not a wife? Another added, or worse, what if he is one of the gods, and this is not love, but a game? You wouldn't be the first mortal to be toyed with. Psyche laughed at first, but something cold had slipped beneath her skin. They saw the flicker of doubt and pressed harder. If he truly loves you, said one, he would show himself. What man hides from the woman he loves? If you are happy, said the other, then see for yourself. Light a lamp. Look upon him. If he is kind and beautiful, he will forgive you, and if not, well, then you will know the truth. Their words followed her like thorns wrapped in silk. Even when she returned to the valley, even when she lay again in her silken bed, they remained. That night, when he came, he kissed her as always, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She trembled not with passion, but with conflict. His breath warmed her neck, and she felt the ache of her own need to know, to see. When he fell asleep beside her, breath deep and steady, Psyche slipped from the bed. She had hidden the lamp beneath the bed earlier, concealed behind folds of embroidered fabric. She held it now with shaking hands, the flame cupped carefully so it would not wake him. She turned, and she saw. He was no monster, no serpent, no beast. He was a god. Wings folded against his back, golden hair spilling across the pillow, skin like light seen through silk. His bow and quiver lay at his side, and in the soft curve of his mouth, in the tired gentleness of his features, she saw the man who had held her through the nights. She saw not cruelty or deception, but love worn thin with fear. Her hand shook, and a single drop of oil slipped from the lamp's lip and landed on his shoulder. He awoke instantly, eyes wide. Their gazes met, hers filled with sorrow, his with betrayal and pain. You could not trust me, he said, his voice barely more than breath. I had to know, Psyche whispered. He stepped back from her. The wings that had once wrapped her in safety now unfurled, preparing for flight. I warned you, trust was all I asked. Now it is broken. And then he was gone. The room began to dissolve. Walls melted into mist, columns became shadow, and the wind that had once brought her peace now carried her down into silence. The palace vanished. Psyche stood alone in a barren field. Her love had wings, and he had flown. The field was colorless, not barren by nature, but stripped of life, as though something sacred had once lived there and fled in grief. Psyche stood alone, the weight of the lamp still clinging to her fingers, even though it had long since vanished. Her feet, bare and trembling, sank slightly into the pale soil. The silence this time was not gentle. It was not the hush of reverence, but of something lost and unrecoverable. Cupid was gone. The palace, the voices, the warmth that had enfolded her, gone. In its place was absence, and with it, understanding. She had not been imprisoned. She had been protected. and in the moment she had chosen suspicion over faith, she had destroyed the only haven she had ever known. But grief, however deep, does not stop time. She began to walk. There was no clear destination, only the pull of forward motion, as if by walking far enough, she could circle back to the moment she betrayed him and choose differently. Villages passed, she slept beneath olive trees and drank from cold streams, her hair wild, her dress torn by thorns and wind. Her face, once compared to goddesses, now bore the weariness of wandering. And yet she kept walking, because love, once revealed, could not be forgotten. She had held it, lived within it. Now she moved toward it as one moves toward light through fog. She searched in temples. She prayed at the altars of every god who would hear her. Demeter, Artemis, Juno, none answered. Perhaps they pitied her. Perhaps they were silent out of deference to Venus, whose son she had wounded and whose pride she had unknowingly bruised. Eventually, she found herself in the temple of Ceres, goddess of harvest and mercy. The structure was quiet, the stone cool beneath her knees as she knelt among the grain offerings. "I ask not for comfort," she whispered, her voice brittle with exhaustion, "only for a path. If you cannot return him to me, let me find a way to return myself to him." The silence that answered her was no longer cruel. It was contemplative, and in that silence, a single thought rooted itself in her heart. If she'd lost Cupid, then perhaps only the one who bound them both, his mother, could unlock the gates now sealed shut. Venus, goddess of beauty, of desire, and of vengeance. Psyche knew the risk. She had insulted a goddess by stealing the affection meant only for her. But love had made her brave, and loss had made her fearless. She would kneel before her if she must. She would serve her. She would prove herself worthy, not through innocence, but through endurance. And so she climbed. Venus's temple stood high above the earth, carved into the cliffs above a foam-lashed sea. The winds tried to turn her away, as if the air itself resisted her approach. But Psyche climbed still, bleeding, blistered, and silent. When at last she crossed the threshold, Venus was waiting. The goddess stood among coiling clouds of perfume, her beauty like polished fire, dazzling, distant, and merciless. She looked at Psyche not with fury, but with amusement. "So," she said, her voice cool and smooth, "the girl who dared to wound a god appears in rags." Psyche bowed, not from humiliation, but from resolve. "I do not ask your forgiveness," she said, "only your help." Venus laughed softly. "Help? You come to me as if this were a favor. You who have taken what was mine. You who lured my son from duty to folly." "I have taken nothing," Psyche replied, her voice steady. "I love him." The goddess's eyes narrowed. "Love," she said, "a mortal's favorite excuse." Still, Venus did not strike her down, nor did she banish her. Instead, with the precision of cruelty long practiced, she smiled. "Then you shall earn the right to speak of love." She gestured, and from the shadows came a great basket, round as a mountain drum. Its contents, at first glance, seemed like nothing: grains, seeds, husks. But as Psyche stepped closer, she saw the chaos within: millet tangled with barley, lentils mixed with poppy seeds, beans the color of night and rice the color of moonlight, all poured together in disorder. Venus said, "By nightfall, you will have sorted every grain into its own kind. If you succeed, we shall speak again." Then she vanished, leaving Psyche alone. The task was not merely difficult, it was absurd. The pile reached her knees, each grain nearly identical to its neighbor. No mortal hands, no matter how quick or patient, could finish such a labor before darkness fell. She sat, and for the first time since Cupid's departure, she felt despair root deeply inside her chest. Not because the work was impossible, but because she had come so far and it had not been enough. But the gods see more than mortals, and sometimes the small see more than the great. From the cracks in the stone, tiny figures emerged, ants, hundreds of them, moving like a living shadow. They scurried up her arms, over the basket, and without command began the work. Grain by grain, they carried the kernels to separate piles, working faster than her eye could follow. Psyche watched in awe, tears slipping down her cheeks. Whether the ants acted from pity or on behalf of some god who still favored her, she did not know. When night came, the task was done. Venus returned, her lips curved faintly downward. "You had help," she said, though she did not accuse. Psyche said nothing. The goddess stepped closer, studying her face, her worn hands, the bruises on her knees. One task complete, but love does not bloom in a single act. Come tomorrow, there will be another, and the next will not be so easily stolen by vermin. Then she turned and vanished once more, leaving Psyche in the dark with her blistered palms and the knowledge that the path back to Cupid would not be short nor merciful. But it existed, and for Psyche, that was enough. Morning came, not with light, but with the scent of salt and fire. The horizon beyond Venus's temple glowed dimly, as though the sun itself were reluctant to cast warmth on the path ahead. Psyche rose before any command was spoken. Her hands were still scratched from sorting grains. Her feet ached, yet she stood without trembling. Pain no longer surprised her. It had become a companion. Venus appeared in a column of mist, eyes shining with cold amusement. She said nothing of the ants who had aided Psyche the day before. Gods often recognize help when they see it, but seldom thank those who receive it. Today's task, Venus said, requires more than patience. It requires cunning or death. She gestured toward the distant meadows, where golden flecks shimmered in the wind. Beyond that plain is a grove where the wild sheep graze. Their wool shines like sunlight, more precious than gold. Bring me a tuft of their fleece by dusk. Psyche turned her gaze toward the meadow. The sheep were not docile creatures. They were sacred animals, wild and territorial. Their horns curved like scythes, and their tempers matched the storms that carved the cliffs. To cross their path in the open light was to risk being torn to pieces. Venus smiled. Do not delay. The sun rises, and so do they. Psyche walked. The meadow shimmered ahead, the tall grass alive with movement. She could see the golden sheep even from a distance, pacing like sentinels, their wool catching the breeze like armor. Each step closer felt like trespassing across the edge of a battlefield. At the edge of the grove, she paused, breath low, heart steady. A whisper rose from the reeds nearby. Not wind, not voice, but something older. Do not enter now, it seemed to say. Wait for the shadows. Psyche knelt and listened. The reeds, brittle and thin, moved as if conscious. They spoke not with words, but with rhythm. And she understood. The sheep, fierce and mad beneath the heat of the sun, retreated into shade at dusk. In the branches and brambles they brushed past, tufts of fleece would catch, untouched by violence. And so she waited. The day passed slowly. The sheep roamed and clashed, their hooves splitting the ground, their golden coats rippling in defiance of all who watched. Psyche remained hidden, pressed low among the reeds, trusting in silence and stillness. When dusk arrived, the sheep retreated. The grove calmed. Birds began to sing again. Only then did Psyche rise. She moved from tree to tree, her fingers collecting the wool caught on thorns, soft as breath but gleaming with divine light. She gathered enough to fill the folds of her tunic, careful not to spill a single thread. When she returned, Venus raised an eyebrow. "Still whole," she said. "Impressive. Perhaps instinct serves you better than reason." She took the fleece with a dismissive flick of her fingers and disappeared again. That night, Psyche did not sleep. She sat beside the empty hearth, cradling her aching arms. Each task proved her devotion, but not her worth. Venus gave no praise. Cupid had not appeared. The gods remained silent. Still, the next morning brought the third labor. This time, Venus's smile was thin. "You seem to thrive under threat. Let us see how well you handle the impossible." She held out a small crystal flask, delicate and clear. "Take this," she said, "and fetch water from the source of the river Styx." Psyche froze. The Styx, the black river that wound through the depths of the underworld, was no simple stream. Its source lay high on jagged cliffs, where the waters cascaded in terrifying force, guarded by monsters of air and stone. Even the gods hesitated near its origin, for the river bore the weight of oaths, and its essence burned the skin of the unworthy. To touch its source was to tempt death. But Psyche took the vial. She traveled for hours, maybe days, time bent around suffering. When at last she reached the cliffs, they rose like the broken bones of giants. The river's cry echoed against the stone, a sound not meant for mortal ears. Its waters surged straight down from jagged rocks, crashing into black pools below. No mortal body could climb those slopes. No hands could hold the waters without shattering. Psyche stood there, frozen, not with fear, but with the knowledge that she could go no further. And yet, something moved above. A shadow cut across the sun, then a rush of air, broad wings, a sharp cry. An eagle descended from the sky, golden-eyed with talons like bronze and feathers like fire. He circled her once, then landed on the rocks beside her. No word was spoken, but Psyche lifted the vial. The eagle took it gently in his claws and rose again, climbing the air in great spirals. He flew into the heart of the cliffs, where no mortal could see, and returned minutes later with the flask sealed and filled with dark, sacred water. He dropped it in her hands without ceremony and soared away. She bowed to the vanishing figure, then turned and made her way back. Venus received the vial with narrowed eyes, saying only, "You are a curious thing, mortal. not clever, not strong, not divine, and yet still standing. Psyche did not answer. Her silence was not defiance. It was the stillness of a flame refusing to flicker. But Venus's eyes gleamed with something else now. Not irritation, but calculation. "There is one final task," she said, almost idly, as if it were no more significant than the last. "Take this box, go down to the realm of the dead, and ask Persephone to fill it with a fragment of her beauty. Bring it back to me, sealed." She handed Psyche a small black box, carved from stone that hummed faintly with cold. Its weight was not physical, but spiritual. "You've worn yourself thin," Venus added mockingly. "You might as well borrow beauty where it still exists." Then she turned away. Psyche held the box and felt its pull, not downward, but inward, a quiet weight. She would have to descend not just into the world below, but into herself. And so she walked again, this time toward death. The winds that had once carried Psyche to a palace of wonder now stirred with a quieter purpose, rustling the leaves and bending the tall grasses in reverent hush. On a rocky hill outside the domain of the gods, Psyche lay still beneath the open sky, her hands gently curled, her face composed in a sleep too deep for dreams. She had opened the box meant to deliver divine beauty to Venus, and within it had found not glory, but the sleep of death, a trap sprung by hubris, desperation, and exhaustion. Her soul hovered between mortal and divine, love and loss, a candle flickering in its final gasp. And yet even in her stillness, something held the air in suspension, not finality, not yet. Far above, the wound Cupid once carried had closed. The poison that his mother's jealousy had sown had drained from his body, and with its absence came clarity. The pain had never been his alone. It had radiated outward, from his own fear, from his disobedience, from Psyche's curiosity, from the cruel tasks inflicted by Olympus. But beneath it all was love, wounded but not extinguished. Cupid descended. He found her beneath the sun, stilled but not gone. The silence between them was immense, a gulf carved by trial and absence. Yet even now she was his, more truly than when she first stepped into his hidden palace, more completely than when she first felt the brush of his touch in the dark. This was no fragile human girl. This was the soul tempered by fire, shaped by trial, and carried through the underworld on her own battered wings. He knelt. In a gesture neither mortal nor divine, he kissed her. The kiss was not magic. It was not a spell or incantation. It was the union of what had been broken, the restoration of trust, the end of doubt. And in that quiet reconciliation, Psyche stirred. The weight of her slumber lifted like mist before morning light. Her breath returned uneven and soft. Her eyes fluttered open. She saw him, and she wept, though no words were exchanged. Cupid wasted no time. He soared upward beyond the clouds toward Olympus. There was only one who could grant the final thread of permanence to what they now shared. Though a god himself, Cupid had no authority over life and death, over the finite and eternal. That power belonged to Jupiter, Zeus, king of gods and arbiter of divine law. Before the throne of lightning and justice, Cupid spoke, not with entitlement, but with plea. He confessed his rebellion, his secrecy, and his mother's wrath. He told the story not as a defense, but as a petition for mercy, for Psyche, for himself, for what they had become. He asked not only for pardon, but for unity. Immortality, he knew, would be the only way they could remain together without defying the natural order again. Zeus listened, and for a time said nothing. But even the sky must eventually answer. The king of gods, whose affairs were rarely moved by love, and even more rarely by mortal persistence, found within himself a flicker of respect. Here was not a whim or a passing fancy. Here was a love tested by betrayal, by labor, by death, and still it endured. Jupiter nodded. A single drop of ambrosia, the food of the gods, the elixir of eternity, was delivered to Psyche. She drank, and in that moment, the boundaries of mortality fell away. No longer did her body belong to the world of death or decay. Her soul, once fragile and earthbound, became something more. Psyche, whose name meant soul, ascended. Venus, though slow to yield, was at last appeased. The trials had been completed. Her son had not forsaken Olympus, but had returned with a heart stronger than when he had fled it. And Psyche, far from stealing him away, had proven herself not through seduction, but through suffering and sacrifice. The mother relented. In the halls of Olympus, garlands hung, nectar flowed, gods gathered not to judge, but to celebrate. The wedding of Cupid and Psyche was held beneath the celestial dome, a union no longer secret, no longer forbidden. Hera oversaw the rites. Apollo played his lyre. The muses sang of perseverance and union, of the way love must weather time, fear, and fire to be worthy of eternity. Even the fates looked on with quiet reverence, their spindles still for a rare moment. And in time, from the union of love and soul, a daughter was born. They named her Voluptas, pleasure. She was not indulgence nor vanity, but the soft joy that comes after pain, the sweetness that only follows bitter. She was laughter without fear, rest without guilt, and beauty without price. She was the culmination of a journey that began in darkness and ended in light. Psyche stood among the gods, not as a curiosity, not as a concession, but as one of their own. Her trials had forged her divinity, her resolve had earned her place, and her love had rewritten the divide between mortal and God. And so the story ended, not with triumph, nor with tragedy, but with peace. No more disguises, no more tests, no more distance between heart and heart. Love and soul, once separated by shadow and pride, were now eternal.